I'm not gonna talk about health, I'm not gonna talk about what I do so much. I just want to share something that's quite valuable to me. It's actually like it's a story about a 17-year-old boy, and I think it's got an important message. It's got an important message for me, and I think you'll find it important too. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But anyway, I'm going to tell it. So this is about. So there's a guy who's 17 years old. He's a bit reckless. He's doing his A-levels at the time, but he doesn't really. He's quite non-conformist. He's a little bit rebellious. And there's one night specifically when he's sharing some time with a friend of his, drinking vodka, and quite a lot of vodka and Red Bull. If you've ever had a lot of vodka and Red Bull, you know what that experience is like. And when it came to a point when he had probably about half a bottle of vodka each with him and his friend, and they're sharing stories, and you know when two boys are together and they're kind of like playing this game of one-upmanship? Have you ever had that experience, guys in the room? Maybe? Okay, great. So anyway, they're playing this game, and they're telling each other stories, and one boy, the other guy tells his friend the story, and he said, "Oh, I was at my old school once, near my old school once, and we were messing around, and we decided to go to my old school and like start vandalising it, just for a bit of fun, like painting the thing, pushing the minibus down the hill, you know, all this kind of stuff like what boys do when they're young." And then the idea popped into his head, "Oh, actually my school is quite close by, and actually we need to go and get some cigarettes too, because we've run out of cigarettes, we've run out of alcohol, so I want to go on a journey." On half a bottle of vodka, him and his friend jumped in the car, and they went in the car, and they drove quite recklessly, obviously, when you're a bit hype on vodka and Red Bull. And what happened, it was, they got to the garage, and they said, "Actually, my school's about 2 minutes down the road from here." So I said, "Okay, well, remember that story, let's kind of have a bit of fun." So they drive in the car, they get their cigarettes, drive in the car, drive to the school, and then they pull up in the field beside the school. And then it's like a cornfield, so the vehicle's quite well hidden. And so they run through the cornfield into the school grounds, and there's this giant church in the middle of the school grounds. And what happens then is they get to the church. The school grounds is quite far away from the rest of the school, so it's quite isolated. It's solo, it's on its own. And so they decide, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have it's like playing a game of dare. The two guys are like throwing stuff at the windows, they're breaking the windows of the church, and then they get into the church and they break in the door, and then it's like, okay, what's next? So there's one guy, he decides, right, I don't agree with church, so I'm going to piss on the altar. So he urinates all over the altar. And then it's like, what's next? And then there's this thing of school hymn books on the side there. So it's like, okay, what can we do next? And so what he does is he takes a lighter and he lights the hymn books. And then it's like, oh my God, what have I done? This is insane. So both of them, they scout, and they just realise what they've done. And then they just run out of the church, into the field, back to the car, and they rush off, zoom off, and they're like having a bit of banter. It's like, it's kind of like a bit of humour, but a little bit of fear at the same time. They hadn't realised what they did. Anyway, they wake up the next day and are like, okay, what happened last night? So that sheer fear inside of both of them. So they drive back and they see a whole load of fire engines police sniffer dogs everywhere, all over the place. And there's this immediate sense of intense guilt, just overbearing to the point they just completely, I just can't believe what I've done. That stayed with one of them specifically. And it always came up in conversation around like the school friends, because it kind of, they told this story, oh, have a bit of a laugh about it, blah, 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 as boys do. Yeah, it's just a silly thing that we did back then. And it was actually on the local newspaper, on the first page of the local newspaper. It was, you know, and they thought it was a bunch of robbers that were frustrated about something trying to steal. Anyway, fast forward 17 years later, one of the boys at the age of 33, and he said he's sharing with a friend of his, and he's sharing the story with a friend of his, what he'd done, because this other friend is actually quite emotionally just quite clear, and it's quite, this other guy who's living with this guilt is finding it quite inspirational what this guy's experiencing, what he's sharing with him. And so he decides to share this story with him because he's realised that there's this sense of guilt inside of him that's been haunting him forever. And when he mentioned that story, immediately there's a shift in state. It's like going, you could feel like this big baggage just rolling around with him. He wasn't able to be present with people, to look them in the eye, because he felt guilty. And then what happened, this friend challenged him. He said, man, you've got to clear that up. What are you going to do about it? He didn't know. He was confused. And then we went to, tried NLP, tried speaking to different people about it, shared it with his family. That completely blew out of the water, that their own insecurities, like, whoa, what did you do? So then what happened is he said he realised that actually coming clean about it the experience felt very freeing. But in his head, it was like, don't even think about it. What, are you insane? You're going to walk into, you're going to phone up the school and tell them what you did? Are you going to walk into a police station and share what you did? And they're like, but the thought of it felt so free. The thought of going through that process. So, he decided to go to a police station and tell the story. He waited a whole year before he phoned up his school and he shared it. And he said, I'm so sorry for what I did. And he went to the people, significant other people that it affected, because he didn't go through his head the amount of people that it impacted. And that's why that impact was just like this weight of guilt that was weighting on his shoulders. But the process of going through that experience and sharing the story and going to the police station and saying what he did, he created £100,000 worth of damage to a building that was built in the 16th century. But he just decided to come clean and share the story with the police. It took a year. Guy thinking, right, okay, I'm going to go to prison. 2 years later, I'm going to go to prison. What am I going to do in prison? Going through his mind, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm going to share with my parents. I'm not going to feel love anymore. People are going to reject me. All of these things going on. Then he went to Morocco. He went on a holiday to Morocco. And then on the second day of his holiday, he received a text message from the policeman. And the policeman said, "We've got an important letter to send to you." But he didn't say what was in that letter. So for the whole of his holiday, it was clocking what was going to happen. He got back on the night. There's a letter sitting there. He opens it up. And it says, "Due to the public interest, we think that it's not in the public's interest to take this any further. And we admire you for your courage." And the headmaster has said that he is being very forgiving about the situation, and you need to make a phone call to the headmaster. So that boy went and he made a phone call to the headmaster, and he shared the experience and why he did it. Because he just said it felt free in his heart. In that space, in that moment, it created a massive, expansive amount of space to grow into something different, to choose something different. And incredible things started happening. Because there's like this thing that's hidden from our view that we don't see until that boy realised it was hidden from his view, but then it was cleared, and there's this big clearing for something new to happen, and lots of incredible things started to happen as a result. And that story is actually my own personal story about what I did to clear something up. And the power of it, I cannot explain. I cannot put into words the amount of freedom I'm feeling as a result of doing that. The impact and the level of forgiveness and compassion that human beings have when you decide to own responsibly something that, because we all have guilt, we have that, but it's whether we decide to just have compassion for each and individual person, for the things that we do. We all have regrets for what we do, but we're not wrong. Never. Never wrong. It's just an experience and an opportunity to have a level of freedom from emotional bondage. So that's all I wanted to share.